All right, biology students, welcome back to our first lesson in our new unit. This unit's called energetics. So we're focusing on how organisms get energy. And in this particular lesson, we're just going to do a brief overview of the entire unit and some of the things that we're going to see throughout this unit. Before we do that, do you remember when we discussed characteristics of living things? Hopefully it hasn't been that far back since we talked about this, so hopefully you remember, but we went through the 8 different characteristics of living things. And one of those things that we focused on is that all living organisms have to obtain and use energy. And that's what this entire unit is about. All right, so how do organisms get their energy? Well, there's different answers to that question. So you can have some organisms that actually make their own food. We call these organisms autotrophs. They're also known as producers. And these producers form the basis of the energy that exists in an ecosystem. And we're going to look at that when we start talking about energy flow. In the ocean, you can have producers like kelp and phytoplankton. In the grasslands, you can have grasses and wildflowers. And then in the desert ecosystem, you can have cacti and shrubs. So these are organisms that produce their own food. They make their own food through a process called photosynthesis. There are different types of autotrophs. So you can have those that use the sun as their main source of energy. Those are the ones that we're mainly going to focus on in this unit. And we call those photoautotrophs. So that would be like your plants, algae, some bacteria. And then you have a few organisms that make their own energy using chemicals. So we call those organisms chemoautotrophs. That would include your bacteria, some bacteria, and archaebacteria that use like minerals from deep sea vents to make their own energy. You can also have organisms that have to consume other organisms in order to get energy. So we call these heterotrophs. They're also known as consumers. And you can see here in the picture, the cow and the tiger would both be examples. You and I are examples of heterotrophs. We can't make our own energy. We have to consume other organisms to get our energy. And there's different types of heterotrophs. So you have those that eat plants only, which we call herbivores. Those that eat animals only or meat would be your carnivores. And then those that eat both plants and animals are omnivores. Then you can have detritivores that feed on organic matter. All right, so we're going to focus on energy flow, food webs, food chains, trophic pyramid. We'll get all into that in a future lesson, but I just want to give you a brief rundown so you can see this very simple food chain here on the screen. Mainly what we're going to talk about in this unit is the energy starts with the sun. So that the sun is the ultimate source of energy for most organisms. And organisms like plants are going to take the sun's energy and through a chemical process known as photosynthesis, they're going to convert the sun's energy into simple sugars. And then what's going to happen is other organisms are going to eat those plants, those carbohydrates, and turn those sugars into cellular energy, which we will refer to as ATP in this unit. And that process is called cellular respiration. And then when we get into our energy flow lesson, one of the things that we are going to learn is that every time energy is transferred throughout the trophic pyramid, 90% of that energy is lost. And we know from physical science that energy is not really lost. It's not created or destroyed, but it is transferred elsewhere, not to the organism that is consuming the other organism. So for example, if the person in this food chain in the picture on your screen eats a cow, then only 10% of the energy that the cow has available will actually move into the human that eats the cow. The other 90% is going to be transferred elsewhere. We're going to really dig into that in a future lesson. I just wanted to expose you to that information now. Same thing with cellular respiration and photosynthesis. I just wanted you to get a little bit of exposure before we jump into some of these specifics. All right, so over the next few days, we're going to start our energetics unit with photosynthesis. So we will be talking about photosynthesis as a chemical process and what organisms undergo photosynthesis and how that works. We're going to dig into some specifics on that and really get into the chemistry behind it. And then we're going to jump to cellular respiration. So we're going to talk about how plants that produce those simple sugars, how those simple sugars are converted to energy for you and I. So you can see this guy on the screen. He's got to have energy to be able to run this race. So where does that energy come from? How does he get it? How does his body, what is the chemical process that takes what he eats and turns it into ATP? So we'll dig into that. And then our very last concept that we're going to talk about is energy flow in an ecosystem. So we're going to pull in a little bit of ecology, and we're going to tie photosynthesis and cellular respiration together, and we're going to put that into food webs and food chains and trophic pyramids, and talk about how that looks in an ecosystem. So I'm excited about this unit. Hope you are too. And I will see you in our photosynthesis lesson, which will be next.